Historically, Iraqi women and girls have enjoyed relatively more rights than many of their counterparts in the Middle East. The Iraqi Provisional Constitution in 1970 formally guaranteed equal rights to Iraqi women. Saddam's Ba'ath Party formed the General Federation of Iraqi Women, which was in charge of running more than 250 rural and urban community centers offering job training, educational, and other social programs for women. In contrast, women today in Iraq face abduction, rape, and murder as punishments for holding a professional job or perhaps letting their faces be seen in public. Peter Beaumont, who writes for The Observer, states, "Violence against women is the dirty secret of Iraq's war," and describes it as one that permeates the new Iraq in its entirety, a permissive brutalizing of women's lives. Peter now joins us by phone from London. Welcome to INN.
Nice to talk to you.
In the article, you speak of a victim who asserts that her assailants worked for the government, the local government, the Shia militia, and later you say, quote, "When we talk about the militias who may be involved, many are members of the police." Could you please explain?
I mean, one of the problems in sort of disentangling what's going on in Iraq at the moment is the fact that the death squads, the people going out killing not just women but men as well, belong to militias, and those militias are attached to political parties, some of whom have got powerful representation in government, and those same groups have infiltrated the police and the army and ministries as well. So when someone talks about someone being part of the state, it's what she's effectively saying is that the people who've attacked her are probably working as policemen or sort of functionaries in some kind of an office, and their two roles, if you like, as killers and as state servants go hand in hand.
You say in the article, if a young woman is abducted and murdered without a ransom demand, she has been kidnapped to be raped.
I mean, that's the other aspect. I mean, that's one of the other frightening aspects of what's going on at the moment. There is a culture of permissive violence, and there is a crossover between sort of criminality and between some of the people who are carrying guns on the streets claiming to be community protectors. And one thing that I came across very, very strongly is the absolute fear, I mean, and not just in Baghdad but across Iraq, of young women in particular being kidnapped. And you hear about these stories, and you hear about sort of the bodies of women turning up, and usually, there is an awful lot of kidnapping in Iraq. Usually there's a ransom demand, but if there isn't a ransom demand, what it tends to mean is it's either a sectarian murder if it's a man, or murder of kidnapping for murder of a political opponent. But of attractive young women, unfortunately, what it tends to mean is that she's been kidnapped to be raped.
Well, you cite as reasons that this violence against women is for defying strict new prohibitions on dress and behavior applied across Iraq by Islamist militants, both Sunni and Shia. Are any women in Iraq safe?
No, I mean, one of the things that I found extraordinary is that people I'd met before, who had felt relatively comfortable, and who, even a person who'd worked as a deputy minister in the human rights ministry, I'd met her sort of 14 months before, and in the 14 months since then, I mean, she no longer feels safe. I mean, she travels with bodyguards. I mean, women who speak out do not feel comfortable. They do not feel safe. There are not many women university professors anymore. When I first visited Iraqi hospitals, I mean, there were a lot of women doctors. You would be hard pushed to see a handful anymore in most hospitals, because they simply do not go to work anymore, because women doctors in particular have been targets of violence.
Could you say that this has become a testing ground for some of the more radical Islamists from perhaps Iran and other places, just as Iraq has become a testing ground for some areas of free market capitalism as it was sold to investors to get behind the war effort.
I think that's a fair comparison. I mean, I think if you look at the bubble markets that have existed in Baghdad, I mean, it's the free market at its most brutal. And I think, you know, you could certainly argue that other people are involved in different kinds of social experiments and different models at their most brutal and extreme. I mean, and it's not joined up. I mean, what the Sunnis what Sunni extremists are doing to women in Mosul is not the same. You know, they're not the same people, although it might have the same result as what sort of, you know, Shia extremists are trying to impose on women in Sadr City and other suburbs, perhaps like Zafranir and other places like that, and even in the south. I think because there is such an absolute weakness of power, it's got a tendency for the most extreme models to come to the surface. I guess as happened during the French Revolution, just as a thought.
In the article you talk about a pleasure marriage, a temporary marriage arranged by a cleric?
It's always been part of Islam. What's unusual is that there seems to be a large growth in this. And
could you explain how it works? What is the structure?
Well, it works in that it's effectively a way of sanctioning sexual relationships outside of proper marriage, because under Islam, if you marry, there are you know, responsibilities towards the upkeep of your partner and sort of inheritance and dowry responsibilities. There is a big debate in Islam about how legitimate it is, and there are some people who think, you know, it's disgraceful. But I mean, what it effectively does is sanctions a sort of state of marriage, but without the sort of the legalistic benefits that you would get from a proper marriage for a set period of time. Women do not have a strong position in these kind of marriages, and in a society that's racked by violence, where women can be intimidated into entering these kind of marriages, it's a way of sort of, for some people, it's a way of sanctioning rape.
Well, you also introduced the term collateral rape, and I believe you tell the story of the Cara Brigade of the Ministry of the Interior, which rounds up some Sunni men. Later, some of the police return to the men's houses and promise their worried women to help find the missing men in exchange for sex.
If you talk to women's activists, I mean, it is not a subject that is on the issue. It's one of the reasons why it was so difficult investigating this. But if you talk to women's activists, and there are still an incredible amount of very, very brave women trying to ensure that whatever the end result of what's going on in Iraq, at least there is some kind of women's representation in it and a proper women's voice. But I mean, all of them. I mean, and I'm talking about, you know, whether I talk to an MP or you know, the woman in charge of the Human Rights Division at the Ministry of Human Rights, or if I spoke to women involved in different groups, they all talked about the issue of rape, and it's something that the society is embarrassed about.
And you mentioned also a lot of murder and even honor killings, which are going on. What do you believe the future is for Iraq's women after this horrible war?
The way things are going at the moment, I mean, you know, in the last 3.5 years, I mean, just taking Baghdad as an example, it's gone as a place from where you would see, you know, women driving around with their heads uncovered, working in jobs like hospitals and universities, you know, speaking their opinions. If it follows the trajectory that's going on at the moment, women's rights in Iraq will have been pushed back 50, 100 years, and their rights will have been massively eroded, and there will be, I can't see what guarantees there will be for them at the moment. I mean, I think it's a catastrophe.
All thanks to the work of George W. Bush. Peter Beaumont, thank you for joining us on INN and for your brilliant insight and investigative work on this subject.
You're welcome.